Welcome, everybody, to the March meeting of Lower Makefield Farmland Preservation. I'm Michael Blank, and joining me is Dennis Stedman, George Hines, and Dan Bonkoski. Sean Carney couldn't join us, but he sent us some notes about his items. So we'll start with the approval of the minutes from last meeting in February. I'll turn it over to George Hines.
Thanks, Mike. The meeting minutes from last meeting has been circulated to the board. We received comments. We've updated them. They're ready for approval. So I'd like to ask if somebody could make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the February meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the motion is carried and the meeting minutes are approved.
Thank you, George. Dan, treasurer's report.
Just one update. We did get the invoice from Lower Makefield Township to reimburse the township for the materials for the fence and gate over on Clearview and the access road there. I did notice the other day, the fence is up. I don't think the gate is up yet, if I'm not mistaken, though.
That's what I saw too.
Okay. But that was the only activity we had since our last meeting.
And Dan, the dollar amount of those materials?
Thank you. $541.73.
That's great. I mean, Derek had given us an estimate of it could be as much as $1,000,
Right.
which we approve. So I appreciate their responsibility and responsiveness and keeping it in the $500 range. That
yeah. Let me
well
just,
done.
Dennis, because that's a good point. Because it was not an itemized invoice. So, Mike, I'm not sure if when they talked to you before they sent it to me, if they referenced that there was anything yet to come. And it just makes me think, because we haven't seen the gate up yet, did we not get the invoice for the gate yet? So I'm not sure there.
They did. Susan, who told me it was coming over, didn't specify, so I don't know.
Okay.
And just a footnote on that. What we discussed was a gate with a lock that would be I know the township has used before. It's a lock that can be opened with a key or a combination, so that if someone needing to access the property doesn't have a key on them, with the combination they can get in. That is not, last I knew, and you gentlemen are confirming it is not there. Derek did make reference in a separate conversation about it may just be a chain, not a gate. And I haven't really followed up on that, but whether it's a chain or a gate, that double access lock is an outstanding issue. And because that property is my responsibility, I can follow up with Derek, sending him a note about the status of that of the gate, chain, and lock.
Great.
Okay. Dan, anything further? Any other expenditures?
Nope.
How about the review by the attorney of our documents?
So I received a handful of drafts. I received a draft amendment and restatement, or just restatement, whatever that may be, of conflict of interest policy, document retention policy, investment policy, and our bylaws. And there is one more that is coming shortly. which would be an amendment of our public inspection disclosure policy and procedure.
Okay.
So those are forthcoming. I have to continue reviewing these and getting comments back to our attorney. I don't think that they're in a place that it makes sense for you guys to also review at this point either. I think it's I'll continue to fill in some blanks here and there, and then when we have them the next turn of the docs, I think they'll be ready for all of you to provide comments on.
Something that just came to mind, Dan, I think the bylaws are wholly within our control.
The bylaws are not, is that what you said? They're not fully in our control? Is that what you said?
They are.
They're not actually. Well,
Okay.
not quite.
Yeah.
There are a few sections of the bylaws that can't be modified without a public referendum.
Right. Okay.
It has to do with, I think, like disposal of land or selling land or something like that.
Right. So except for those, well, those sections need a public referendum. Everything else is so, and she's aware, the attorney's aware. I guess
it's in the old version of the document, so
right.
It's already written into the document, so she's not changing. To state the obvious here, she's not changing any of the provisions that would require a public referendum vote.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any further thoughts on that?
Just one item, and I don't know if it's elsewhere on the agenda. I don't have it in front of me right now, but
Yeah.
as it relates to drafting a lease, Dennis, I think we just need to connect on then having her provide some commentary on that. But I think, I don't know where we are, if it's with me right now, or do I have a version that I can send to her? I wasn't sure where we're at on that.
On which lease, Dan? I missed.
So redoing Bob Calavita's lease.
Oh, yeah, that's on the agenda. That's coming up under lease updates. Thank you. But on the topic of reviewing our documents, just a kind of a sidebar. I became aware of an organization called the Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organizations, because of another committee with Lower Makefield Township associated with Patterson Farm. Ron Schmid, who is the chairman of the Pennsbury Manor Foundation, the nonprofit that runs, that supports Pennsbury Manor, he has tapped into this association. It's a state association that any nonprofit in Pennsylvania can become a member of relatively modestly, I understand. And they used Pennsbury Manor used that organization to review all of their bylaws and documents, and the same thing that we're doing. And I'm not suggesting changing anything you have rolling right now, Dan, because it's well in tow and everything else. But we're considering, this other committee is considering turning to that organization. And as I learn more about it, if there is some applicability to farmland preservation as a nonprofit, it's the impression I have is it's to some degree, at a small scale, a relatively free resource that we as a nonprofit can turn to for questions and answers regarding organizational, operational issues. Just FYI, I was unaware of it until a Zoom call here a couple of weeks ago, but just to put that kind of in everybody's thought process, there is that resource out there.
Cool.
Good. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dennis. Okay. Dan, anything else?
Nope.
All right, we can turn to community outreach. So at our last meeting, Dan Grenier said he would send an upcoming newsletter, a draft of something that we would put in an upcoming newsletter for for Lower Makefield Township, and he reached out to Monica Tierney to put her in touch with me, and I think we have a blurb all set to go. So I'll get that to her to appear in an upcoming newsletter. And if not, I'll follow up with her. Okay, so leases. Dennis. So we have a couple for Dennis, depending on the assignment of the parcels, one for George, one for me.
Right, right. So to the point Dan raised, the Colavita lease, we have had discussions with Colavita's tree farm. We're in agreement on all terms of the lease. I've revised the lease that has just expired and revised it with just those particulars modified, the particulars being moving from 7 acres to 8 acres, changing the dates. It'll go from what was a 5-year plus 5-year lease to a 10-year lease, and a couple other particular tweaks. All of the standard language of our lease, which is 96% of the text probably, is unchanged, and Bob Colavita is fine with that. I've circulated that to the board for comment. Haven't had any, so I'm taking that as okay, approved. Sean and I have been managing those discussions with Bob, and so with that, I'll send Bob a red line of that lease so he make it easy for him to see what's different. And as a result of that lease, we need to modify the lease with Farmland Farms. That lease is active today and expires in 2029. We're reducing their lease by 1 acre, and therefore their rent by that appropriate 1 acre rate amount. We can do that with a side letter that we've used before for this kind of mid-term lease modification. So I've drafted that side letter again. I've had no comments, so unless there's any comments tonight, I'll send both of those leases out to the revised lease to Colavita and the side letter agreement to Farmland Farms, and we should be good to go. There's no outstanding issues that I'm aware of between the parties.
And Dennis, if you could copy us when you send them out, just in case there's something last minute we could catch. Yeah.
And absolutely, I'll copy the board.
Great.
The next item I see is.
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
On this one here a bit. And Dennis, we can talk about this separate if easier here, but I do think that we should discuss a little bit more. And I just pulled it up here now. I remember the initial comments. I didn't recall seeing an updated one that incorporated everything. But I do want to comment on this escrow obligation and how that should be handled. I think we might need to discuss that part a little bit.
You're right, Dan, and thank you for raising that. There is an escrow obligation associated with the Colavita lease, which is unique relative to all of our other leases, and it's because they are not harvesting annual crops, which planted and harvested each year. They're perennial crops, they're Christmas trees. So if that lease with Colavita should end, the fields would be unsuitable for typical annual crop production because of tree stumps and tree roots in the middle of the field. So that escrow is there so that if and when that lease ends, the Coalavitas would be responsible to return the property to its original state compatible with annual crop production, which would mean there would be, not only any existing Christmas trees that are still there would have to be cut down and removed, stumps would have to be ground down, etc. If there were trees that were bald and there were divots in the field or something like that left from the current agricultural use that cultivators have, again, I think it's obligatory, I think in our bylaws, that any leaseholder, when they turn the land back to us, has to be compatible, should return it to us in a compatible state for agriculture. And so with most of the other leases, that's really not an issue. They're planting annual crops. So they harvest the crop, it's ready for the next year. In the case of Christmas trees, it's unique. And the question outstanding there is, what is an appropriate escrow? The dollar amount in that escrow today was established 10 years ago, and I'm not sure upon what it was established. So what my proposal was to contact Cochrane, and I have done that, but I've not heard from Matt, Cochrane Landscaping, to give us a feel, a ballpark estimate is, I think, the term I used, of what it would take if 1 acre of a Christmas tree farm was turned back to us and we had to hire a third party to return that to farming status or farming capability, what that would cost to cut down, and remove some trees and grind stumps, et cetera, et cetera. I need to follow up with Matt Cochrane on that. I sent him an email and have not heard back. I'm presuming is the board okay to use that kind of estimate as a way to establish that escrow?
Yeah, I think it seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll pursue that with Matt. Thanks, Dan, because that was an outstanding issue.
But we do need to discuss, and I think we should do it in executive session. I don't think it should be in a public forum right now at this point, how we handle the escrow from a legal perspective,
Right.
Which is a different topic. And I
Right.
think that discussion should take place before the lease goes back to Bob, so that he has a complete.
Okay. Yeah, because how those monies are handled and financially accounted for should be buttoned up. Let's do just that.
Okay.
I think to do it in probably some chronological order, I'll pursue that estimate from Matt, so we get we get a handle on what this amount is, and then we can meet in executive session to talk
I'll set
about
that up.
the administration of that.
Yeah, by the way, I don't think anything that we're talking about is going to change the substance of this,
Right.
in a material way. And from my conversations with Sean about this, he said that Bob seemed open, pretty much open to whatever seemed reasonable. So.
Yeah, and to be clear and to say it in public, Cultivitas have been a wonderful tenant to farmland preservation. They're very responsible, very responsive, been very flexible and cooperative in any way, shape, and form. Our interests are aligned. When you plant Christmas trees, I mean, the old saying is, to plant a Christmas tree, you have to be to plant a tree, you have to be an optimist. You're doing it for the long run. So they grow and manage trees for the long run. We're trying to preserve, agricultural land for the long run. So it's really been a good relationship, and we really value the cultivator relationship.
I think, Dennis, the only other question I have is, since it'll be a 10-year contract and you're getting an estimate from Matt today or this year, how do we deal with potential inflation over that 10-year period and down the road? So it's very clear that if the lease ends at any point in time, all the way up to the 10th year, what that cost is for escrow.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, George. My thought on that was to take his, current 2024 estimate, inflate that by a compounding factor of 3% for a 5-year period. That would kind of, take effect today and maybe be a little high for today and maybe a little low for 10 years, but just because I'm not sure. What I didn't want to do is make it complicated where that escrow itself actually inflates, but just put kind of a future value in it. I'm not sure we want to put a 10-year value in it, but maybe 5 or 6 years. I'm open to the council of this board to represent the period a little more accurately, if you will.
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds good to me.
Okay. All right.
George? Yeah?
Oh, you up to me? Okay. I have not done much yet at this
No,
point.
no. George, I was just asking you, does that sound reasonable to you?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
I
okay.
thought you were moving on to the next item already.
No,
Okay.
not yet. And Dan, to be further discussed, but for now.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
once we get the numbers, we'll discuss it. But conceptually, that was my thinking. Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, so to another fine leaseholder of ours, Sven Sternad.
Sven has I have a request into Sven as well about renewing the lease. He definitely wants to renew the lease. We did the first lease as a 3-year lease because it was just a trial. We'd never kind of ventured into this direction of beekeeping and honeybees, but it has certainly helped the pollination, the pollinator population of Lower Makefield Township. So I've proposed to him a 5-year lease renewal. I've not heard back from Sven. It's a busy time of year. But I'm sure I'll be surprised if there's any issues. He's happy with the square footage that we've provided him in Makefield Brook parcel. And he's happy with the lease amount. It's $10 a year for, to put down a couple, now what is 4 beehives. He may prune it to 2 this year. And then rebuild the 4, winter loss and all the rest. I'm proposing no change in that lease. I think it's a technicality because it shouldn't be free, but he does us more good than we do him, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And
he's losing money on that operation.
But losing.
It's an expensive hobby. I mean, he spends a lot of money.
And I hope I didn't speak out of turn, but I when I saw him, I said, if you need anything, any support, so that offer's on the table. He also wasn't quite sure he had seen a revised lease, so he may need another little.
I simply emailed him to say, here's what we're proposing. We would propose the same terms for 5 years. I didn't actually send him a full copy of the lease.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you'll do that.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. George, Bridal Estates.
Yes. So, Doug Wright's got the lease through the end of this season. His intention is to farm the crops up through Thanksgiving time, is what my understanding is from conversations I've had with him. So to me, the real question for Bridal Estates is he's been farming that property, and I guess it's the Tanner, he does it for feed for the Tanner family farm over there in whatever town that is.
Yeah.
In Bucks. But I know in conversations, I guess with you, Dennis, and or Sean, Tim and Sam might be interested also in having that lease. So the real question is, how do we go about, I have a copy of the lease, existing lease. I believe I have it in my pile of stuff here. The real question is okay, knowing he won't be the one who's going to renew the lease, how do we, or do we have a process for accepting bids, reaching out to different parties to entertain who we actually want to engage the lease with? I mean,
Right.
I don't think there's going to be a problem preparing the lease, writing the lease, doing that once we know who we're dealing with. That question becomes more, who are we dealing with in the future beyond the fall of 2024?
Right. Well, to be clear, yeah, Tim and Sam Stewart of Shoreland Farms have expressed explicit interest in leasing that parcel. They would like to do that. What Sean and I told them when we had our annual breakfast meeting was that we also, out of responsible management, wanted to hear from Tanners if in fact they were interested, and if they are, what rent would they be proposing? But we've had no contact with Tanner, nor have solicited that.
Right.
It was my understanding that Doug Wright was soliciting that on our behalf, but if he has not, maybe you want to follow up with Doug to see if he will, or if not, we could directly say, if you want to, because I know Doug Wright was proposing that Tanner lease his entire farm and his sister's fields. See, what Doug Wright is selling is 50 acres, which he's been farming, and his sister's property, Sharon Kimmel, that has the horse farm adjacent. Doug's been farming that as well. And it was my understanding that Doug was going to propose to Tanners that they rent his 50 acres and his, I said sister, I think it's a cousin, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
His relatives, adjoining parcel. And if Tanners are renting all of that, it would be efficient if they rented our adjoining parcel as well. So I think at some point there needs to be a conversation with Tanners. We know Shoreland is interested, and they've been a great tenant, and we're happy with that. But in the spirit of proper diligence, we really should explore it with Tanner. So that's what I know.
And I think when I get back, like at the end of April, beginning of May, I can kind of start to put those feelers out. The other question that I have is, I believe Doug's been growing hay, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
So the only other question I have is there anything from our perspective, as far as the type of crop that is planted and harvested on there, hay versus corn versus soybean, do we really care? Or as long as it's a bona fide crop that meets all our requirements, that's fine?
I think the latter, that it's fine.
I agree. I think the latter. We're not the farmers trying to manage exactly what's the proper crop to plant in any given year, given commodity prices and things. We're the landlord. So yeah.
And I'll just put in a pitch for diversification, and that's why I agree with Dennis that we should approach the Tanners first. And I like the idea of leaving it open and asking them. They'll certainly know how much Doug's been paying. How much would they offer to lease the land from us? I think that might be the. But I take your point, Dennis, that we don't know if Doug has already. I'm sure he's mentioned it to the Tanners, but has he really approached them and if more efficient?
Yeah, I don't know that.
So maybe George, that would be a way.
Yeah, I think George needs to, as he said, talk to Doug and
right.
And sort that out. But
and that I can do from down here. I can call Doug.
Yeah.
And say, look, we just want to kind of circle back with you, understand timing, a few other things, and what conversations you've had or not had, so that we can, in sometime early May, start to, move forward with some conversations with them or anybody else that might be interested in farming the land.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and start that way. And we want to respect the stewards, and if they
Oh,
are
absolutely.
interested, if it doesn't work out with the Tanners, we'd certainly like to have.
And the other dynamic in this is, as I understand it, and again, George, you can investigate. When Doug is proposes leasing his farm to the Tanners, it's for the 2025 crop year only, because then it's going to become developed. I mean, the developer has purchased his land, is my understanding.
That's my understanding.
But the planning and the engineering and the approvals and everything else associated with that is going to take time. So the land will be available to be leased by a farmer in the 2025 season. Our preserved farmland, of course, is unimpacted by that. So ours can be leased in 25, 26, 27 and in perpetuity. So we will want to keep in mind, will the Tanners have an interest beyond 2025? Maybe they will. But that's just part of the dynamic of this transaction that's going on.
Okay.
Okay.
Good points. All right. Move to Heather Ridge. So I spoke to Tom McGowan. He's interested in continuing the lease. I suspect it would be for 5 years. He's never been in favor up to now in a longer lease. So he did bring up a couple points. One, I already alerted Sean that Corcoran hadn't cut the limbs so that he could come down through there and maintain the buffer. He'd agreed to do some cutting and getting into the Haney property and cutting there. And the second one, which we've heard before, is that he feels that the acreage that we leased to him is too high a number. And he said that he has a document from the U.S. Department of Agriculture that, to him, says he's leasing fewer acres than we say he's leasing. So I said, please, Tom, send it to us, and we can look that over. So there's a couple outstanding issues there. Well, really, the only outstanding issue for the lease is the acreage. The other is sort of a maintenance issue. And he intimated also on the maintenance issue that he's going to be doing cutting, and he might ask for some compensation for that. So I can continue that dialogue with him. But the acreage one is an interesting one. So that would have an impact on the lease if somehow the acreage isn't right. Thoughts? I know, Dennis, you've been out there with Tom, and he's raised this point before, correct? You're on mute. I don't know if you're talking, but you're on mute.
I was talking and I was on mute. My apologies. I'm looking up the acreage files. His point on the accuracy of acreage, I mean, I don't know. Let's see what information he has. What we have is what's in, as I understood it, in register with the county as acreage, at least for the parcels, but the county has no information on what's croppable versus wooded. So we can look at his information and we'll respond accordingly. What I wanted to look at is our other farmland preservation leases, and are those leases based on croppable acreage versus aggregate acreage?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I'm trying to do that live on stage, which is probably a really bad idea.
I think the way that it says total and then it says tillable.
Billable.
Yeah, there's total
Yeah.
and tillable. And do you know, Dan, is that calculation of dollars per acre times an acreage equals total rent? Is that based on the tillable? Do you have that in front of you? I'm sufficiently old and IT insufficient that incapable that to do that live is risky.
I just need to find one here. I'm opening them up, but I just need to find one that has both listed.
Like Makefield Brook lists both.
Okay.
Because there's a large wooded area there.
There's a large wooded area there.
Yeah.
I think it's well, let's just see what it is.
It would. Are you going to look, Dan, now? You're trying to look?
It's opening right now.
Okay. So I told Tom while Dan's doing that I was pleased that he was going to re-up. That was good.
Absolutely.
Didn't know that he would. And yeah, so it's just a matter of coming to terms on the lease.
Yes, I just looked at Makefield Brook, Dan. It's based on 22.6 acres, which is the tillable acreage.
Yep.
The total acreage is 33 and a half, and the tillable is 22 and a half, rough numbers. And so our acreage rates are based on tillable.
Tillable, yeah.
And Heather Ridge is listed as 58.2 acres total and 47.4 acres tillable. So if we do that math, because he's got a rate of 50 by the spreadsheet and the lease I have, his annual rent is $2,607 per year, which is $55 per acre per tillable acre. So I'm not sure why he's thinking that his rent is on aggregate acreage versus tillable.
Right, right.
The math.
He might be disagreeing with the 47. Because I think what he had pointed out in the past is that little pocket over by that one new house is not actually, tillable land really. I think that might be included because there is wooded area that he has on his property in there too. A meaningful amount, right? So I think it's that little pocket.
Oh, okay. You're right. So that would make sense because what we count as tillable is that basically lawn around the Haney place that is cut grass close to the neighborhood that he does not farm.
Right.
He does not farm that.
Yeah.
And so it does make sense, at least to me, that those acres he should not be paying for. If that's what he means by aggregate, I get it, that he's right.
Yeah, yeah. And how could we estimate without a survey about how much that is from the aerial, from Google?
Yeah, from the aerial. I mean, these apps that we used, we can draw areas, and it tells you how many acres it is to the third decimal point. How accurate it is hard to say, but it's I think it's a reasonable estimate. We could do that.
What I will follow up with him and to clarify if that's what he means, if that area by the yeah.
Right. If that's what and that's he's right. It's very reasonable. I would not push back on that at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't appreciate that was a distinction he was making, but that's a good point.
Yep. Okay, very good. All right. Any other points about the leases? So, I mean, after we clarify some of these points, we'll then get get it into the written part of the leases and then get them out towards the as the year progresses, especially on Bridal Estates and Heather Ridge. The only one we really need to do now is Calavita and Sternad, right?
Yes. Yeah, because the rest are not renewing.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that need renewal. Yes, yes. And to your point, Mike, if there's, in terms of managing the docs
Oh,
or editing the docs, I'll do that for all of those. Yeah.
great. Yeah, I think it's good to have it in under
Okay.
one person's hands. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so renaming of parcels. Turn it over to George.
Okay, Sean and I met a couple of weeks back, and partially what Sean was sharing with me is conversations he had with Sam and Tim regarding how they refer to all the parcels when they're going out and doing things. Part of that is, I guess, with their farm equipment, with the machines that they use either for, spraying fertilizer, tilling, harvesting, they've got things that they can program on their computers in the cab. And for every parcel, they put a name to that. So when they pull up what they have to do, they just hit something and it says, okay, it's Stackhouse. And that has all the information they need to know, and it gets them what they need to do. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parcels, okay, that we have. When he sat down with Tim and Sam and went through that, of those 10, 4 of them are referred to as we refer to them. So those are Stackhouse, Bridal Estates, Leadham, and Heather Ridge. Those are the 4 that they refer to as we refer to them. When you get into how do they refer to the others, he shared those with me, and I have them listed here, so bear with me when I share this with you.
Yeah.
So for Clearview, they refer that to radio tower because it's by the radio towers.
Okay.
Okay. Longshore, they refer to that as the Belden Farm. And I guess that goes back to a point where the Belden family farmed that property, and that's how they know it. So that's how they refer to it. So for Bethel and Farmview 1, that is looked at as the Bond Farm. So if you go back to looking at before a lot of roads were done and developments were done, the Bond Farm had a fair amount of acreage that they would refer to, okay, and what they farmed. So what we call Bethel and then Farmview 1, that would be the Bond Farm. Okay, and I believe if you look at the sign on Woodside, that's the farm that's referred to that Reelin did with all their donation of the property. Okay, now Farmview 2, this was an interesting one. They refer to that as Stackhouse 2 because that's across the street from Stackhouse.
And it has a sign that says Stackhouse from Reelin, right?
Right, and so that whole thing was Stackhouse Farm on both sides of the roadway. So that's how they refer. So they refer to that as Stackhouse 2 because it requires different settings than Stackhouse. The one Makefield Brook, this was an interesting one. They referred to that as the nursery because at one point that was a nursery tree farm back in there.
Okay.
That's all the woods and all the trees. So that's how they refer to it. So basically you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our current ones would be renamed down to 4. So at the end of the day, you're basically combining Bethel and Farmview 1 into one parcel now, or one reference point. Okay, so we would come down to 9 places, of which 5 of them would get new names, 4 are the existing names. So I know from talking with Sean, they went through a lot of discussions, a lot of the history and how they refer to them. If we start referring to them the same way, that way if we call and we say, hey, what's happening on Stackhouse 2, or we saw on Stackhouse 2, they know exactly what parcel we're talking about. So this was the proposal that Sean and I came up with, was to align in those cases where we're not the same, align with how they refer to the parcels with respect to all their settings, their computer stuff, and their farm section, so we're all aligned. So, having said that, what do you think?
All right. So George, we'd have to retrain Corcoran now, right? Because
Yeah, we can do that.
yeah,
I thought Corcoran had some of these same names.
He may.
I
Sean
thought
and
Corcoran was
did-
sometimes confused, and he
Yeah.
was more aligned with the Stewarts than
Probably.
he was with our naming. I thought, but
and he also asked for just tell me what street it's on and with the corner of that kind of
Right.
thing. Yeah.
So this is kind of where Sean and I left it. We agreed that a lot of this makes sense. It ties to what the Stewarts are doing. It ties to, you know, some of the history of where these farms came from originally, before some of these roads were pushed through and developments made. So to me, it sounds reasonable.
Georgia, one comment, radio tower, Clearview. I thought I've heard the Stewarts talk about that as the Black Farm.
me too.
Yeah.
There was
So
you're correct, because I guess it was the Black family that
Mhm.
farmed it years before that.
right.
But currently they refer to it as the radio tower. Historically, yes, there's a link back to a family that farmed it, but now they refer to it as radio tower because of the presence of all the radio towers.
And the township refers to it that way. If I call
they?
Derek, for example, you know,
Uh-huh.
say over by the radio towers, that's when people know what I'm talking about. If I say Clearview, he said, which one's that?
Right.
You know?
So
Okay.
I think our recommendation is if we can align, and, you know, I don't think we have anything to gain by trying to be unique compared to the township or to the Stewarts. And Sean and I, our thinking was, why don't we align with their thinking? Since this has nothing to do with legal documents or anything else, it's more of reference points when we're talking with Corcoran or with the Stewarts or anybody else. That should be fine. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay. Well, we're running a little bit late, so why don't we just to move this along? Any discussion on that? Are people in general okay with it?
I love it. In my book, it's a touchdown. No
The
score.
only thing, from your expression, Dan, I'm assuming you're okay with it too.
This is great.
George, maybe you create a little sheet.
Yeah, I could do that. It's been a while since I've had to do any of those crazy PowerPoint presentations, but I can whip up a
Yeah.
one-pager that,
Yeah, one page. That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go for it.
I'll dust off the cobwebs and,
Little memo to the file.
yes.
And Mike, if our to the third topic or whatever it was on our agenda about community outreach, to the extent that includes any kind of map showing what
Yeah.
properties are ours,
Right.
these new names could and should be a part of that and
Mhm.
help, you know, kind of seal that deal.
Yeah.
And we can share it with Cochrane, the township staff.
If you get Dennis or Mike, you know, the map that has different shades of green and red and yellow. If you can get a clean PDF version of that map, which something tells me Jim Majewski is able to create a PDF of a clean version of that map.
Right.
I can edit the PDF then to put little arrows and boxes like the old version that was literally like a picture of a map.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'll make another attempt.
Yeah, if you can get a clean version of that, clean current
Yeah.
version of that, and then
Mike, you wanna,
so,
you're
George,
gonna
literally, if you
follow
just
up with
write
Jim?
it out on a list, then I can put it on the map and then send it back to you, George, just to confirm that it's correct.
Yeah, I'll
Okay,
take that as an action to get the PDF and have Dan edit it, and then we can include it in the newsletter. I think it's a great idea.
George,
Yeah.
thanks to you and Sean for stopping, pausing, and just kind of doing it once. Thanks.
No
Still do
problem.
not know what is Farmview 1 or Farmview 2. I don't know.
Doug Riblet used to get them all mixed up all the time when he was on the board too. Okay,
Even our alumni will appreciate it.
right, right. Okay, so thank you, George. Thank you, Sean and Abstentia. And we'll move on to requests, farmer requests. First one is on the driveway gate on Leadham. Sean says he's working on that. It'll be a slow process due to permits now because it's a state road there. He said he went over the map um, with it, sort of to map it, not the map, to map it out of where it should be, how long. He's waiting for the township to get back with next steps. That's Sean is. So that's a quick update there. Tree limbing on Leadham. He says that'll be on the winter list for 24-25, about 1 day of work. So that's added to Corcoran's list. And then there's the driveway gate on, well, we already covered that, the driveway gate on Clearview, right?
Yep.
So we can move on from that. Farmland preservation signs. So they have not been changed. The Halp sign, Halped Farm sign has not been taken down. The new one has not been put up, but Public Works has the new sign. And the bent post on Leadham for our sign has not been taken care of. Derek says that within a couple weeks, they're working on road signage right now, that they'll be able to get to that. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, our last full topic is next steps on neighbors' use of our properties. I'll start with the Wexford Court folks. Dennis,
As I said in February, I'll follow up with that in April, May, when things are starting to grow and lawns are starting to be cut. I took an attempt at that in February with not a lot of response, so I'm gonna come back to that in the spring.
Okay, okay. And then, so the two I have, Heather Ridge, 1475, I was able to speak to it's a Mr. Pryor. I was on the phone with him yesterday. I did leave a note. So he has not thrown it. He had some pumpkins that were thrown on our side, called them biodegradable, as some of our neighbors often do. But he said he has not done anything since he received a letter, a specific letter to him, plus our all neighbors letter. He asked, what I did was I left because they didn't answer the door. I didn't know if they were there and wouldn't answer or were away. I left a envelope with a small note in there taped to the glass panel next to his front door. And he asked me never to do that again. So that's a lesson for us because he was worried that neighbors, he's already had his house burglared. And he was worried that this was an advertisement, since it sat out there for a few days, that they were not home. So just a lesson learned there. But I have his cell phone number now. He's agreed to call us with any issues, and we have his number to call him. He had been in the past clean, and this is probably true of a lot of our neighbors, cleaned on our side. He says now, having received our letters, he won't do that anymore. And he also mentioned that to him, one of the trees that borders on our side, borders his property, is dead or dying. So I said we'd certainly take a look at that. So I think all in all is a positive interaction. And the other one on Fairfield Road, which is the Bond Farm if I've got that right.
Right.
1630 Fairfield Road. Matt was out there and there was nothing thrown over from that property, although they had in the past. So I think our letters are beginning to have an effect. So that's all good. Okay, so that's it. Any other things?
I think that Corcoran did a nice job on the Bond Farm, formerly known as Farmview 1.
Thank you.
I drive by that every day, so they look like they did a pretty good job doing a lot of cleanup there.
When I was out, I agree, they really did. And one of the neighbors, I mistakenly went to her house, had the wrong address, and she gave me a lengthy review of what a good job she thinks that the Corcorans are doing and that we're doing in turn. So,
Good.
so
Good.
that was good feedback.
It's good to hear that the all neighbors letter or good neighbors letter is having an impact. It's another reminder. It's pretty hard to over communicate. Communications solve a lot of issues,
Mhm.
and we need to remember that.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Any other business?
Nope.
No? Alex, any public comment to this point?
There's no online public comment.
All right, thank you. Review of action items. George.
Okay, I have a couple here. One, Dennis is going to follow up for the status of the chain and the lock for Clearview. I have a responsibility to do a follow-up phone call with Doug Wright regarding the lease of his property and any conversations he may or may have not had with Tanners and their interest. We need to confirm the acreage amount for Heather Ridge. Mike, you were going to do that.
Right.
I'm going to put together the one pager for renaming of the parcels. And then Mike was going to reach out to get a PDF copy of the farmland map so that as we start to rename the properties, we can put it on the map.
Okay. I had a couple more. I was going to set up the exec session
Okay.
handling the escrow. Dennis was going to forward the lease to Sven,
Right.
right? And also Dennis was going to follow up with Matt on the escrow estimate for the Calavita
Right.
lease. That's all I had. Anybody have anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I think we're finished. I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
And at 6:59, Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion. Well managed.
And everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's 7 o'clock. We said aye. Thank you very much. Very good. Good seeing you
Yeah.
all.
Take care.
Take
You're
care.
the best. Thank you.
Bye-bye.